All right, so welcome back. I'm going to be taking over the Ruby presentation for just a couple minutes. And I wanted to show you something cool that's kind of an easy way to learn languages, something called koans. This is kind of a preview because we're going to be doing something similar tomorrow during the Elixir part, something similar to this, but these koans exist for Ruby as well. And what these are, it's just a way to kind of practice a language. It's basically a system that's set up using unit tests, where you're learning about the language in kind of like a little gamified sort of quiz format. And whenever you get the right answer, the test passes and it kind of moves on to the next one. So it's sort of a way of learning language features. And making tests pass and kind of turning things green. So if everybody will go to rubykoans.com, I'll post this in Slack in Empower Public folder. That link right there, Ruby Koans. All right. And you'll notice a big button right here, download the koans. So go ahead and click that. And that'll download it locally for you. And it's a zip file, so when you click on that, it should pop open, and you'll have a little folder here called koans. Yep.
If you're on Windows, you need to make sure the tab is highlighted on Windows instead of Linux. Or does it matter?
Good question. I don't think so. Yeah, they're just Ruby files. So the question was, if you're on Windows, you need to make sure this is highlighted. The koans are all just Ruby files. So they'll work on any platform. So once you get those downloaded, I'm going to create a new folder here. I've already done it, but if you follow along in your Empower folder, let's see, projects, Power. If you want to create a folder under Empower, drag that folder once you unzip it. Sorry, let me pull this up real quick. Okay. So we got our downloads. On Windows, you're going to have to right-click the koan zip and click and unzip it. And it'll leave you a little folder, koans, and if you open that up, you'll just see a bunch of Ruby files. Okay. So I want you to copy that folder and put it in your main Empower folder. So you'll paste it in there. Okay, and then I want you to open an editor. You can open Visual Studio Code. I'm going to be using Atom, but it'll work the same way. Anything with a terminal in it, open Visual Studio Code, because that's what you've been using this morning. And do open the folder that has the koans in it, right? So you should see something similar to this. And I'll bump this size up a little bit here. Yeah. I'm going to create a new terminal window. Okay, now I'm inside my koans folder, and I've got all of my koans files here, and I've got a little terminal. So if you're in Visual Studio Code, you should see something similar. All of your koans files here, all your Ruby files, and then have a terminal window open. And what we're going to do back here on the koan site, we're gonna run this command when you're in the root. So Ruby path to enlightenment, and I'll post that in Slack as well. All right, I'm going to hold off for just a second because Winston-Salem's kind of still getting their speakers set up. But once again, just to reiterate, you click on rubykoans.com and download those, unzip that folder. So it's going to be this page, rubykoans.com. Download that. It will be a zip file. You'll have to unzip it on Windows and then put that folder in your main Empower folder, kind of in your Empower root. And then you'll want to open up either Visual Studio Code or Atom or whatever editor you want that has terminal. If you've been using Visual Studio Code this morning, you might as well keep using that. And you'll want to open up that folder. Okay, all right, so Winston-Salem's all good. So if you missed it, just yeah, click on the link here in Slack, rubykoans.com. Click on download. It's going to download a zip file. Unzip it. There should be a folder called Koans inside. And I want you to copy that into your Empower folder. And then I want you to open up in Visual Studio Code. I want you to open that folder up. I'm using Atom, but you can just easily use Visual Studio Code. And you should see your folder called Koans and a bunch of Ruby files in here. Does everybody got there to that point? Okay. All right. So once you've got your command line up and running down in the bottom of your editor, I want you to paste that command in there. Ruby path underscore to underscore enlightenment.rb. So we're going to paste that in here and hit enter. All right, and you'll see a little. You'll see kind of a little. The master says you have not yet reached enlightenment. Do not lose hope. Okay. So this is what I was talking about. This is kind of like a little test system that helps you learn the language. So what you'll see is please meditate on the following code right down here, and it'll show you a path in a file about asserts.rb. Okay, so let's go and click over here to about asserts and open that up.
Do you need to like put something in the terminal before we check in? Like that?
Nope. Nope. As long as you're in that folder. So the question was, before we type that command, is there anything else that needs to go in the terminal? As long as you're in the Koans folder, you should be able to type that command and it should pop up.
Unless you just type it.
Okay. So you'll see here, okay, mountains are merely, your path thus far. You've kind of got like a little status bar down here. And the goal here is to kind of learn about the language by making test pass. So you can see, you remember from the other day, we were talking about assertions and assert statements kind of in unit testing. Okay, so Ruby's got its own unit testing framework as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of make these tests pass and learn about the language while we're doing it. So the first one, it's saying about asserts.rb, line 10. And here we go. So we should contemplate truth by testing reality via asserts. Okay, so the assert, this should be true, kind of gives you a little hint. So we'll just change that to a Boolean. First one's really easy, right? Assert true. And when you save it, you'll notice that down here the rules change. If mine was running, you'll notice that your rules change down here. To test things, you click up and do Ruby path to enlightenment. When you click the up key, it has the last statement that you put in your terminal. So it's kind of a shortcut to run it again. You can just hit up and enter. So you'll see we're on the second test, right? So now we're on line 16. So we'll scroll down a little bit here in our about asserts page. And so enlightenment may be easily achieved with appropriate messages. So test assert with message. Assert, this should be true. Please fix this. And we'll try that out. All right, so it says we're progressing. Those two are relatively easy. They obviously get much, much harder. So scroll down a little bit, and here's the next one. So it's asserting expected value equals actual value. So the actual value is 1 plus 1. So what's the expected value? Obviously it's 2. Yep. So right here you're going to want to replace this little underline with 2, and then run your Ruby path to enlightenment again, and that makes it happy. So you kind of see how these work. Essentially, is that the same one? That's weird. Better way of testing asserting equality. Okay, so this is just showing something about the test. Right here, it's assert expected value. This equals this, and this is saying this is using assert equal. So it's a little bit of a different test method here. Kind of looks a little better. So it's same answer there. We'll fill that in too. All right. So this is just about this first kind of set of things is really just kind of getting used to the test, like saying, hey, you need to make these sort of pass. They need to be true for the assertions to pass. Haven't really gotten into any language features yet, but so assert equal to is 1 plus 1. Run that again. All right. So now we're actually going to start learning about Ruby a little bit, right? That was just, how does this work? How do I make the test pass? Now you'll see down here, it wants us to look at the file about nil on line 5, right? So we'll close this out, close out about asserts, and open up about nil. So this is going to be telling us a little bit about the nil in Ruby, which is like null in C#, right? It means like nothing here. All right, so on line 5, test nil is an object. So assert equal nil is an object. Okay, so this is basically saying this is unlike null in other languages, right? In other languages, null is just like it's an absence of anything. It's an emptiness, right? In Ruby, remember I said everything's an object? I wasn't lying, right? Even nothing is an object, right? Everything is an object. So even nil is an object. So basically this is saying nil is just Ruby's way of saying, like, what type is this? Is it a string? Is it a whatever? You can kind of test if it's a certain type. So this is saying nil, is it a? And remember, when in Ruby, if you have a question mark, everything's going to, by convention, everything's going to evaluate to true or false, right? It's going to be a Boolean thing. You're kind of asking it a question. So all this is saying is nil an object? Well, we just said in Ruby, everything's an object, right? So this should be true. And it is. All right, so now down on line 12. All right, so test you don't get null pointer errors when calling methods on nil. What happens when you call a method that doesn't exist? The following begin rescue encode block captures the exception, makes some assertions about it. Okay. Okay, so remember we talked about how null reference exceptions are like 95% of exceptions in programming. Ruby is no exception to that. You can see nil right here, and then some method nil doesn't know about, right? So this is kind of calling a method on something that doesn't exist, which is going to blow up. You'll notice this begin and rescue here. You remember in C#, like the try catch finally, that kind of the way to rescue yourself if you get an exception. This is Ruby's version of that, right? So anything between begin and rescue, it's like, give this a try, like try this out. We might crash here, but let's give it a shot. Everything in this rescue block right here is going to take that exception and do something with it, right? So right here, this is going to blow up, right? Because we're trying to run a method on nil, which is, it's not going to work. So basically it's saying what exception has been caught. So it's saying this little EX right here, this exception, what's its class? So what's its class? What kind of exception is that right there? just a regular exception, right? So basically you would say that's just an exception. You can have all different types of exceptions. The regular exception they've got right there is sort of like the default one that others would inherit from, just like C#. So we'll save that, we'll run it. Okay, so this one was wrong, it's not an exception. So the exception that's captured there is equal to no method error. So let's change that to no method error, see if that makes it happy. Okay, cool. So that made that assertion happy. Remember, you can trap different exceptions. So we could have done another rescue here. No method. So no method error. We could have done a rescue there to capture that that specific type. Rescue. So what message was attached to the exception? Hint. Replace blank with part of the error message. Okay. So basically, down here, expected undefined method, some method nil doesn't know about, to match blah. So this is kind of the error message that's being given off there, and that's what it wants to say. That's what it wants to match there. Every exception has a message property in it. So whenever you get an exception, it'll be of a certain type, and then .message will kind of tell you what's going on here, right? So this particular exception was a no method error type, and what it was saying in there is undefined method, blah, 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 this method here for nil class. And see, I told you nil's an object, right? It's even got a class, nil class. It's its own special little thing. So basically that's saying nil class doesn't have a method on it called some method nil doesn't know about. So it's like when you try to call that, it blows up and gives you that message. All right, so this one's called test nil has a few methods defined on it. All right, so this one's interesting. Is nil nil, right? Like nil, even though it's supposed to represent nothing, because it's an object, it does actually have some methods on it. So let's see if nil is nil. Should be. Okay. Nil to string. And if you want to test any of these, remember you always have IRB, right? So it's like you could just fire up a terminal session, say IRB, and then if you're not sure about some of these, what is nil to string? Ah, okay, it's an empty string. I did not know that. And let's see what nil inspect is going to do. So nil inspect is going to create a string with nil in it. Like that. Okay, so then it gives you a little kind of a thought experiment. So is it better to use object.nil or object equals nil? And then why? So if the object was nil, if it didn't have anything in it, yep.
Well, I mean, if it's dot nil, you're using it as a method, and if it's equal, you're filling it with nil, right? Or setting it equal to that.
Equals is comparison. So the question was with dot nil, you're kind of checking for it. With equals, it's comparison. Object.nil is basically going to say, is this nil? Now, if it's nil, it has, all objects have that method, like, dot nil, is it nil? So this is going to evaluate to true. Object equals nil, it's like you're testing for equality on kind of a reference type. So that's sort of weird. It's like, does this object equal nil? Let's do this. Let's test. Let's see what's going on in here. So I'm going to open up IRB again. We'll take a look and see what's going on with this. So if I say nil object equals nil, and then I say nil object, is it nil? True. Yep. What about object equals nil? Oops, sorry. Nil object. Okay, so both are true. So they're saying, is it better to use that? I would kind of argue that the first version, the one on line 32, is kind of more explicit, right? It's sort of like you're checking for nil. That'll kind of work in all cases. A little more readable, I think, too. It's like, you know, whenever it has a question mark, you're kind of asking whether it's true or false. Okay. So let me make sure is everybody in Winston-Salem kind of caught up? Ping me on the private channel in Slack. I've got that open when y'all want to take back over. You know, these are exercises. Obviously, there's a ton of them. It takes a really long time. We're on 7 out of 282, so we're obviously not gonna finish this today. But you know, this is a great way of learning about the language. I've been through this whole thing in Ruby, and it kind of points out some of the eccentricities of Ruby, some of the things that make it really kind of weird and different from other languages. So in most languages, if you have an array and you go off the end of it, you know, you're iterating and you're going like, you know, you're indexing it, and you hit the end, and then you go one more, you'll get like an index out of bounds, or index out of bounds error. In Ruby, it loops around and goes back to the beginning, right? Which is sort of potentially unintended behavior, right? There's all kinds of like weird sort of things like that about Ruby, and these koans are really good about pointing that out, like kind of showing you like the edge cases, like the weird things about Ruby that make it different from other languages. So they're eye-opening if you go through all of them. If you're interested in Ruby at all, I would definitely recommend going through all these. But Ballant and Allie, feel free to ping me on the private channel when you're ready to take over. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going. All right. So it's talking about, let's see, about nil, line 26.
I missed the previous one.
Which one?
The sixth one, the line 16.
16. So in line 16, we just had a question about this one. When it's grabbing this exception here, the class of that, the type of exception, is no method error. Essentially, whenever you try to call a method on something that doesn't, on a class that doesn't exist, that's what you're going to get, your no method error. That's important in Ruby because you can kind of assign methods to classes on the fly with code. And there's a lot that happens a lot in sort of metaprogramming, and so the no method error actually comes into play quite a bit. Okay, so they're saying Ballant can resume. So I'm going to leave it there, but just know that now that you've got these koans downloaded and ready to go, that all you have to do is do Ruby path to enlightenment .ruby.rb to test it, and it'll tell you kind of which file it's on and which line it's on, which thing it's talking about. And there are usually some really good notes in here that explain kind of a little bit about the language and sort of what you're learning as you go along. It's like a self-paced, kind of class almost. It's really nice. So I'm going to leave that there. That's a little bit of a preview for tomorrow because we are going to be doing some Elixir koans. And I will let Ballant take back over and switch the stream. Bye, Winston.
I think, if I'm correct, Harper covered the basic syntax of methods and classes, or did he just jump straight into the test?
Right into the
All right. All right. Well, here's a little something that that actually should do that. So, as you can see, it's very complicated. Try to compare it to other languages. What does this do? Creates a class called wild. These are.
Harper said there's no audio on the screen.
Uh-oh.
Those are methods.
Yes.
Is your audio cable still plugged in?
I don't need it. I don't need it. I've got HDMI.
Just check your speaker settings. It's on internal. Okay, wait, go to OBS. Oh, they see it?
They have it?
No.
Okay. All right. So you guys missed all that important stuff. You're never gonna recover. So what I was saying is apparently Harper jumped straight into tests. So so we can cover the basic syntax here. That what a class looks like, what methods look like. As you can see, just like with everything else Ruby, it's about as simple as it can possibly be made for developers. One thing that because I don't really use it, one thing that I didn't realize, and I'm just going to delete this in a second, but where do you see where do you see scope on there?
Outside the end.
Yeah, so that would indicate
That it's public.
that everything is, that everybody can see. What if you don't want them to?
You don't have to identify it.
You just, right? Okay, so what do you think that does? It just says anything above me, you can still see. Anything below this, it's all visible here. From here until, yeah, exactly. It's not just, it doesn't just apply to that one. It applies to anything that's written below that line versus above it. So why make me type out the exact same thing for every single one when I could just do that? So yeah, Ruby's nice to you like that. Hopefully you're starting to see the pattern there. All right, so this is. What do you guys think this will do? And I don't know if I can, how much you guys can see in the back, but I'm trying to get as much of it on the screen as possible. So just, what does that do? Somebody real quick run through it. Sasha.
Okay, so you created a class called wild. You set the methods. You have 3 methods. Going through, you created an object of that class called W.
Instantiation. Yeah.
And then you apply the can you see me method to it.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't seen that, so you have to help him out with that as well. So
You have to help them out with that. I don't. First time I've seen it. And Harper.
You know by now Ruby is really loose. This is exactly how loose it gets. So the send method exists on all objects. Send is Ruby's way of saying, talk to me. What are we sending there? What's that data type that we're sending?
A string.
Symbol.
It's not a string.
Symbol. Symbol.
A symbol. Remember, symbols are slightly different. All methods are also symbols. So all you have to do is like, that line 17 is exactly the same thing as W dot what about now, question mark. Exactly the same thing. So I'm getting looser and looser. So 17, that works. 18, then it's, okay, that's prompting you. 19, that says let them type something in. 20, take whatever string they typed in, make it a symbol, and call the method, name that. Do that, C#. 21, okay, how would you describe this language? We get an adjective, whatever they type in, and we're doing exactly the same thing. We're calling a method named yep, Ruby is, passing a parameter, whatever they typed in. And you can have as many as you like, just comma, 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 comma. You can, and I've seen this done in production code, take a string, and because they didn't want to type the method name 10 times, they would have the first part of the string being the prefix of the method, and then they just concatenate a string, two symbol, call it, call it, call it, call it. So you can actually search your code for the name of the method, and it's not in there because the method name is actually dynamic, and it runs at runtime only. Now you see the power, and with great power comes great responsibility and great angst when you're trying to debug that code. Show how it works.
Okay.
Which method would you like to call?
Which method would you like to call?
ABC.
Sightsource.
Oh, C. Yeah, it was a C.
And it's just
You forgot the question mark.
All right, so I can't see the thing because of the. All right, so one last time. All right.
This, that Ruby is very loose. Your method names aren't even sacrosanct.
Even method names are not sacrosanct, as Ellie said for Richmond.
Do you think you can build a method and add it to an object dynamically at runtime? Yeah.
All right. Well, with that demonstration, we are actually going to shift gears a little bit and jump into Rails. So what I want everybody to do is go to whatever folder you picked for whatever directory you picked for your Ruby materials, and let's do a bash here, and just type the following. Again, super complicated. It's going to be Rails new, and it's actually a lot like a lot of other things. Node, Angular, Rails new, and then whatever name you want to give it. It has to start with a letter, and it has to be
What are we creating?
all lowercase. We'll see.
Oh, we need to know what we're creating. To know what
We're creating a new Ruby on Rails project, an MVC project. So just pick whatever Ruby is fun, and then somebody get out a stopwatch and go. Oh, it's super slow for some reason. Okay, so what is that? Well, it's right here. Ruby's fun, but let's look inside for a sec. Yeah, go ahead and save it. So just drop it in, either do open folder or just drop it into code, and let's start another terminal as well, just so we can look at it. Start another terminal and just do Rails S.
What was the command again for the
For generating it, it was Rails new and then the name of the project, all lowercase, No spaces. Rails command not found. Did you check your versions? Did you check whether you have Rails installed? Sorry? Huh. Okay. So Rails S. Anybody want to venture a guess what that does?
It installs a bunch of stuff.
Sorry? Starts a Rails server. So with that, open up a browser. Go to localhost 3000. Ruby Power Activate was the other. 3000, yes.
Is it not coming up?
Oh, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? I started that Rails server in the...
It's there. It's there.
Oh, it is there. Sweet.
Oh, it just took like a minute to load.
Something is wrong with the universe when Rails takes this long. Anyway, so yeah, this is nothing. It's just, but we're gonna in a second we're gonna dig into what all just got generated for you, but wanted you to see that it is there, that something is alive now. Something. Rails S, yes.
Not a Rails asset.
No, just Rails space S.
Into the same folder or into the folder you downloaded?
If you,
Or does it?
can you get somebody to help so I can keep rolling? But it should be make sure that if you did it inside code, make sure that you started the server where your project.
So what did you do? What are we talking about? You just showed some stuff.
That's what we're gonna dive into all the good stuff that just got generated there. So we just said new. I have a new project. I wanted to build a new Ruby on Rails application called Ruby is Fun. And so I heard that somebody told me that the way to start it is to type new Ruby is Fun or Rails Ruby is Fun or Rails is Fun, and it'll just happen. And so what is the it that just happened here? What was all that stuff that was flashing by the screen that got generated? Basically, this right here. This is all stuff that Rails just built for you and wired up for you, and then we're going to real quick just go down the list and see what all happened here. So first one is the app itself. This is where the major components of your application will be your controllers, models, views. Those should all look familiar, especially because Angular did something kind of similar when it first generated everything. Helpers, jobs, mailers. Well, I don't know if we'll have time to get into those today. Assets, configuration, images, JavaScript, style sheets. It's a lot of.
What type of app is this?
Other than Rails?
Yeah, they've seen one of these before.
Sorry.
They've seen one of these before.
It's an MVC web app. All right, so what else is here? There's the bin. It contains Rails scripts that are update, deploy, run your application. Let's see. There's a couple of these we'll have to touch back on. Config, just just as you'd expect, where you set up your database, where you set up your routes, where you set up your the server that is running right here. All right, do we need to